Hey everyone, and welcome to Milo Game Reviews, where we review games both new and old on all platforms. My name is Milo, and if you like the content that I make, then please subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you never miss a review when it comes out. Today, I want to talk about a game I've been waiting for a very long time. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is a game incredibly dear to my heart and is actually in the top 10 of my favorite games of all time. The game still has issues like the combat, and the last 2 hours are basically very rushed and repetitive, but the amount of freedom and choice that you have to play this RPG is so incredibly good, and a reminder that most modern games are simply worse and more restrictive compared to how games used to be. I will definitely do a review on Bloodlines 1 in the future and praise it to its high heavens. But for today, I want to talk about the sequel, which is very disappointing to us fans of the first game. In fact, I would argue that you might actually enjoy this game more if you are not familiar with the story and setting of the first game altogether, and simply play this because you want to experience a linear vampire detective story. In any case, let's dive in, shall we? So in Bloodlines 2, you play as the character Fire, a vampiric elder who awakens from their slumber after 100 years. You can either choose a male or female Fire, and they can also choose from a handful of clans that will determine what starter abilities you have. I have always loved the Toreador in the first game, and so it was but an obvious choice to choose this here as well. And I'm glad that they made the call to no longer put the Toreador and one other clan behind a paywall, as that is simply a very scummy thing to do for the hardcore fans. You cannot choose all the clans from the first game. Some that are absent are the Nosferatu, the Gangrel, Malkavian, though they do have characters from those clans in the story. There are also 2 clans that you could not be in the first game, which I thought was very cool to have them added here in the form of the La Sombra and the Banu Hakim. After Fire wakes up, you find out that there is another Malkavian vampire by the name of Fabian stuck in your head. Fabian is a detective and was working on a missing person case and a streak of gruesome murders when he suddenly vanished from the face of the earth. He has no recollection on how he got stuck inside your head, and by following the story, you slowly unwrap the puzzle on how it all went down. You constantly will hear Fabian talk and comment on things happening in the game, and though I have a lot of critique of the game, I also have to give credit when credit's due, and I think Fabian's voice acting and delivery is great. He kinda sounds to me like Ryan Reynolds, and him being Malkavian also fits the picture since Malkavian are a notorious clan within this world that are absolutely nuts. They often hear voices, and in the first game, you could even have conversations with street signs if you chose to play as a Malkavian. Now once you've chosen the clan and got accustomed to Fabian, it is time to explore the new main hub of the area in the form of Seattle. The first game took place in Los Angeles and had 4 main hub areas, but here we have one that is much bigger than the ones in Bloodlines 1. But this will also be the only hub that you will be exploring, and it can become quite repetitive towards the end of the game. The atmosphere out on the street is pretty nice, seeing as this takes place during Christmas times, and you can see Christmas decorations everywhere, and the streets are full of white shiny snow. But the visibility is also very limited due to the snow, and the end result is that the environments never seem memorable to me. Though I do have to say, right before actually recording this, I started up the game again after a hotfix, and they might have actually increased the draw distance to make the environments pop a little bit more. Now the music, on the other hand, was actually quite close to the soundtrack of the first game, and I was pleasantly surprised by how much I was pulled back into the Masquerade world by hearing the music when walking through Seattle. Also, hearing all the familiar terms like the Camarilla, the Sabbat, Bruja, Child, Sire, Kindred, and more made my non-vampiric heart flutter in excitement. There's just something so magical about this setting and world that makes me want to play pretty much every game that takes place in it, even if it's not that great. Now, rather than an RPG where you can tackle quests in any order or any way you want to fancy yourself, this is more like a linear action game, and the so-called RPG elements simply come in the form of abilities that you unlock when leveling up. When you level, you only get an ability point that you can exchange for an ability, and you don't actually have stats that you can put into these. So there's no lockpicking, no hacking, no speech options, no weapon skills, etc. For me, since I was a Toreador, I unlocked abilities like one where I could literally kiss any enemy on the mouth and they would become my ally for a while and fight alongside me. Now I have to say that I actually thought it was pretty funny that they properly showcase you kissing the enemy every time, which is not something I think any game has ever done before. Other abilities include Blink, which lets you teleport to nearby locations, or one where I can slow down time. Now throughout the game you also have the ability to learn other clans' skills by drinking the blood of specific vampires, thus unfortunately also making it not that special whichever clan you chose to be. Now the game lets you walk through Seattle, and one of the cooler things the game does is that you can actually climb up walls and jump and glide over the rooftops to speed up your journey. This actually feels pretty cool, and you do feel like a mighty badass vampire when you do it. Then you head towards specific mission characters that will give you an assignment, and often these assignments involve you going somewhere specific and taking out a set number of enemies or a boss. You sometimes need to follow a scent trail or maybe solve a puzzle by using your telekinesis powers. But overall, it's always a linear experience of go here, kill these, and go back to claim your reward. And the combat in Bloodlines 2 is absolutely awful. I still don't know if it is worse than Bloodlines 1, because Bloodlines 1, despite how much I love it, also has some pretty terrible combat, especially the gun combat. But the melee combat at least feels kind of visceral, with swings really connecting and bodies flying all over the place. It's kind of honestly quite entertaining when you see it, even though it's not that great. But in here, the animations of your melee punches are good, but the enemies are very spongy, and there are often so many that battles go on forever. They also have this thing where enemies will always stagger for a while once you deplete their health bar, and this is so that you can feed from them and replenish the health and blood points which you will need for your abilities. But more often than not, you will have HP aplenty and just want to get things over with and take them out. It makes the already awful combat longer than it needs to be. You of course can also take them out stealthily, but the stealth here is also what you have come to expect from games in general that implement stealth, and something that I'm so incredibly tired of. Enemies will simply walk down a chosen path and you take them out, and people near them will have no clue. Now stealth in Bloodlines 1 was also absolute garbage, so I will not fault Bloodlines 2 for that as well. But what is missing here in Bloodlines 2 are those memorable, awesome, and unique missions. There's no mission like the notorious haunted hotel like in the first game, or side missions like Gimbal's prosthetics or the serial killer that you follow through LA. None of those types of missions are here, and the side quests in Bloodlines 2 are also just the most bare bones minimal types where you go deliver an item to an NPC or take out enemies and come back. And again, the cool thing about Bloodlines 1 is that you often had multiple ways of tackling missions. If you needed to go into a place that was guarded, you could maybe persuade the guard, or bribe him if you had money. You could also kill him and force your way inside, or maybe sneak your way in through a vent or other opening. That is not in Bloodlines 2. It is even to the point where once you are in front of a closed door and need to go through a vent, it is simply a linear story beat that you have to do that, and it's not actually a choice or an option. There's no hacking like there was in the first game, which actually was super cool because you had to manually type in prompts and commands by using your actual keyboard. Now that does not seem like a feature that is too difficult to implement, because in all honesty it was not that deep of a feature, but it is yet again absent here. Honestly, making this review made me realize that the worst thing about this game is that it is called Bloodlines 2. I think it would have been better to call it Swansong 2, since we also got Vampire the Masquerade Swansong a couple of years ago, and it feels more like a sequel to that than the first Bloodlines. That is also why I think this game would be more enjoyable if this is your first entry in the series or are not familiar with the first game. Because story-wise, it's not actually that bad. The game plays out over different timelines. Fires and Fabians. Fire's timeline is the present, and you need to deal with the political situation as Seattle's prince has been murdered, and the new prince is having trouble with the different factions like the Anarchs stirring up the pot. There's also the dazzling Vantru Lou Graham, voiced by the same actress who did Rogue in Cyberpunk and does Diana in the Hitman series, who wants to regain her old position of power and is trying to use you as a tool to do so. These are all interesting characters, though they do not come anywhere near the memorable and quirky characters of the first. I also thought it was a bit strange to have the Nosferatu Tully move around the game in public, whereas the whole point of Nosferatu in the first game was that they were so hideous and mean looking that you were forced to move through the sewers and were even cut off from certain quests because the quest giver would simply not talk to you. But then again, that was 20 years ago, so maybe things have changed and people have become more tolerant to Nosferatu, I don't know. But anyway, that is Fire's storyline. You also switch to Fabian's perspective in the form of flashbacks where you actually get to do some detective work. Now, I love detective stories and games, and so it was quite delightful to play these parts, and yet again, I could see this being an enjoyable, if somewhat standard, detective adventure game for newcomers to this setting. You get to talk to people and investigate crime scenes, and since you are a Malkavian, you have some cool and unique abilities like being able to talk to inanimate objects for clues, or mess with the minds of suspects in order for them to spill the beans. These sections also feel the most like walking simulators, which I know is not everyone's cup of tea. This game has been through absolute development hell, with it being given to multiple studios and finally the Chinese Room being the ones who finished it. They are of course known for their walking simulators like Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs or Everyone's Gone to the Rapture. Now, one other issue that the game has is that you will often visit the same location twice or sometimes even more, since you will have to go there in both Fire's timeline and in Fabian's. So it is not uncommon to go to a certain bar or club and investigate things there in Fabian's timeline, and then the flashback ends and you now have to go there immediately again as Fire. You really only go to 6 or 7 locations in this game over and over and over again, and by the end it became so still and boring that I just wanted it to be over. It is sad too, because I do think that the game has potential. The story in Bloodlines 1 was mostly about you as a newcomer to this world and learning about all the cultures, habits, and rules, so there is actually room for a deep and great story within this setting. But it is presented here in a way that is simply too limited and repetitive for it to be enjoyed by fans of the first game. I think it will still be worth your time to pick up on a sale to dip your toes back into this awesome world, but otherwise, I would suggest replaying through the first game again. In the end, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 gets a 6.2. It is the absolute bare minimum of a decent game, since it does do a few things right, like present an intriguing story, and some elements are cool like traversing over the rooftops or using Malkavian abilities during the detective sections. It is such a shame we will probably never see a proper sequel that honors the first game. Though, with Baldur's Gate 3, there was a bit of hope that still games are being made where you have so much choice in how you approach quests. Maybe someday we will see that sunrise and it won't burn off our skin as we face a proper sequel.